I'd like to welcome everyone here to the 110th commemoration of the Portsmouth Peace Treaty. Again, in the room in Wentworth by the Sea, where many of the delegates celebrated events during the 1905 ceremony. And I would say that this is the first time since 1905 that diplomats from the Russian Federation and Japan have been in this room since the Portsmouth Peace Treaty. And it's particularly auspicious because this room was used on August 29th, the day that the parties actually concluded the negotiations in principle. That is, agreed on what the peace would be, but did not have the written document, which happened not until September 5th, which is today. And the Japanese said, let's have a celebration that buried the hatchet, in American words. That's how the Americans said it. The Japanese used other words, much more convivial, love fest, that sort of thing. And they had this celebration here, and it is appropriate that this is the room where the Russian Federation and the Japanese diplomats first meet. And we want to thank the Japanese government for sponsoring this event and providing for it, just as they did in 1905. So this is going to be a program that has a movie in it. It goes for about 25 minutes, so we're going to move right along with the speeches. And to start off, the state senator from this area, Martha Fuller Clark, will read the governor's proclamation.
The state of New Hampshire, by Her Excellency Margaret Woodhousen, Governor, a proclamation. Portsmouth Peace Treaty Day, September 5th, 2015. Whereas September 5th, 2015 is designated by statute as Portsmouth Peace Treaty Day in perpetuity throughout New Hampshire, and whereas the intent of Portsmouth Peace Treaty Day is to commemorate President Theodore Roosevelt's designation of New Hampshire as the host for the peace conference that ended the Russo-Japanese War, the largest modern land and sea war the world had seen. And whereas President Roosevelt relied upon the United States of America Assistant Secretary of State, the United States Navy, and the governor and the citizens of New Hampshire to facilitate the 30 days of formal and informal negotiations between the Japanese and the Russian diplomats in and around Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And whereas in Portsmouth in 1905, quote, an uncommon commitment to peace became a common virtue, quote, as, quote, citizen diplomacy, unquote. The involvement of the local people significantly contributed to the favorable outcome of the negotiations that earned President Roosevelt the 1906 Nobel Peace Prize. And whereas the bill marking Portsmouth Peace Treaty Day throughout New Hampshire is the sole example of a state honoring its citizens for the active role they played in fostering successful international negotiations. And whereas 2015 marks the 110th anniversary of the Portsmouth Peace Treaty. Now, therefore, I, Margaret Woodhousen, Governor of the state of New Hampshire, do hereby proclaim September 5th, 2015 as Portsmouth Peace Treaty Day and call on the residents of New Hampshire to observe the day with appropriate ceremonies and activities commemorating this important part of New Hampshire history. Given this 21st day of August in the year of our Lord, 2015, and the independence of the United States of America, 240, signed Margaret Woodhousen, Governor. I'd also like to offer my congratulations and recognition of this important historic day. Thank you.
5 years after the 100th anniversary of the treaty, the people that celebrated that treaty in 2005 came to this room and commemorated their celebration of the treaty with a photograph, which is exhibited here behind me on the bottom. These were the people that were actually involved in celebrating the treaty in 2005. And in honor of both the Russian and Japanese foreign diplomats here today, we decided to try to give an example of exactly why and how the local people did celebrate this treaty. Because that's kind of like the most common question you get: why are you doing this? So when this photograph was taken, we had a photographer, cinematographer available. And anybody who was part of this photograph, who wanted to sit down with the photographer and tell them why they participated in the celebration of the treaty, which was over 30 days of celebrations, and what it meant to them, we took their photograph and actually their film. We're going to have this film, which is about 25 minutes, which is people talking about why they participated, and I hope you get a sense of it. I was fairly overwhelmed by the number of people that came and the degree of enthusiasm that seemed to have been engendered by this event. But if I really think about it, when I realized what happened in 2005, I really shouldn't be that surprised, because it's the idea. And the idea is that people who understand what happened here in 1905 realize that local people can make a difference internationally, locally, nationally. And when they had a chance to remember that fact, I think that they flocked to indeed recognize history that happened in 1905 and realize that they were making history because they were recognizing how important the concept of citizen diplomacy was. So when you get to the end of the day, it's the idea. Citizen diplomacy matters. In New Hampshire, we're different. In New Hampshire, every citizen has a chance to make a difference. It's part of our culture. It's a culture in the primary. It's a culture in small towns in terms of the town meeting. And in Portsmouth, you saw a lot of city councilors here who were very involved with local groups and local issues. Everybody makes a difference. And so when you see an example of people making a difference to end a large war, the largest war up until that time, it kind of touches some place that's part of what being New Hampshire is. And I think it's interesting. The politicians, I think, got it for the first time in a way, but they got it. And they passed legislation that said we're going to recognize that for the future.
My good friend was Thomas Wilson, and Thomas Wilson kept alive the history of the Treaty of Portsmouth when everybody locally had forgotten all about it. And Tom collected photographs and information and memorabilia. At one point, he even was able to get the table the treaty was signed on from Rensselaer to brought to Portsmouth, and he had it in his in the Portsmouth apartments for a number of years. And before it was finally sent back, he acquired some of the chair that Camorra sat in and signed the treaty. So Tom was my hero, and Tom died, and he left all his materials to the city of Portsmouth, and the city of Portsmouth didn't know what to do with them, so they went to the Athenaeum. So in 1985, Portsmouth became a sister city with Nichinan. Nichinan in Japan is the city that was the birthplace of Baron Camorra, who was the chief negotiator for the Japanese for the Treaty of Portsmouth. And because they were coming, I thought it'd be a great idea to do a book. My friend and patron was Joe Sartell, said, "You do the book." I said, "I don't want to do the book." He said, "You do the book." So I took all the photographs, I did some research, and it's primarily a photographic book. I started working on it in April. We had printed books in August when the people from Nichinan came over. And really the celebration that's going on from that. The book was really what brought back people's interest in the treaty.
The shipyard still lives as a symbol of peace. We in the Navy pride ourselves as being you know, guardians of that peace that's very fragile in this century as it was back then. So to be able to have a part in ending a conflict such as the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905 was symbolic of our service and symbolic of our community here in Portsmouth.
In 2005, the New Hampshire National Guard headed up an effort to host the Portsmouth Welcoming Parade. In 1905, the National Guard supported the governor at that time in putting together a parade to welcome the delegates to the city of Portsmouth. And in 2005, we were fortunate to have about 500 uniformed members from all different services coming down the streets of Portsmouth, welcomed by the citizens and visitors to our lovely state. And it was a high point for the visitors and for many of our uniformed members, and I feel very privileged to have been a part of that effort.
My grandfather, Samuel Shapiro, came to this country in 1898 from Russia. He was from the Ukraine. He had been in the Russian army, and when he came here because he didn't want to serve in the Russian army. And in 1904, he told me later that he remembered the celebration, the parade downtown, and meeting with the Russian delegates because, of course, he spoke Russian and they spoke Russian. So this is a story I've carried with me for a long, long time, and being a part of this peace treaty celebration is really very, very special.
I just want to express that the Jewish community was actually founded in the same year as the signing of the peace treaty in 1905 as a community, as a congregation. They later obtained the building, but I can't help but think that they formed themselves into a congregation, into a community, after the Russian Jews over there had an opportunity to commingle with each other, probably because of the result of the Portsmouth Peace Treaty as well.
We're very proud that the Athenaeum has been involved for quite some time in the commemoration of the Peace Treaty. The Athenaeum inherited the collection of Thomas Wilson, who was Count Witte's biographer, and then one of our proprietors, Peter Randall, wrote There Are No Victors Here, the major history of the Peace Treaty, and we've also accumulated a very large collection of photographs and artifacts, including several chairs that are now on loan to the exhibit at the Historical Society. So we're very pleased to be part of this process.
I became involved in this wonderful celebration because I wanted to be sure that in this particular part of the history that Black people would not be left out of the story, as we have been so often in the past. The Black population of Portsmouth was here playing an important role in 1905 in the background, as Black people often did, as servants and as the people who were helping to make things happen.
When we were asked to participate in the 100th anniversary celebration, we discussed it and decided that probably the most effective and far-reaching thing to do was to present the story of the peace treaty to our audience of families in a family-friendly way. So what we did was we did sort of a picture book overview of the story in our art gallery, and I created an exhibit that had a lot of really interesting images. Chuck Doliak had a great collection of images that he gave me access to. I included a lot of tidbits from the newspapers at the time. They were very interested in all the little human interest details of what the delegates did, what they ate, where they shopped, and I included a lot of those to appeal to our visitors. And I was also able to go to the Athenaeum and photograph the actual newspaper headlines and use those in the exhibit too. So Hopefully by doing that, I was able to bring history alive for our visitors, and I certainly brought it alive for myself. It was a fascinating thing to do, and I really appreciate being a part of it.
As a resident of Portsmouth and a native of New Hampshire, I always had a strong interest in the Portsmouth Peace Treaty. I was fascinated by it as a historic event. So when the anniversary committee started forming in 2002 or 2003, I quickly jumped on the opportunity to become a member of it so that I could participate in helping the anniversary really highlight this very important event. At the time, I was also the chair of Strawberry Bank Museum, and the museum realized that it was an important event and wanted to be part of the celebration. And of course, as a museum of history, it recognized that this was one of the more important historical events of the Seacoast area. My particular interest in it was in the recognition that this event really stands for the ability of the average citizen to make a difference in world affairs. I think too often we view major events as coming out of the boardrooms on Wall Street or the halls of Congress or the Oval Office, when in fact the Portsmouth Peace Treaty, in particular the month-long events at the city of Portsmouth and the surrounding communities created in order to create an atmosphere that encouraged negotiation, made all the difference in the world. I think if this event had been held somewhere else, it might not have occurred as it did, and that's why I think that this was really an important event, and I was very proud to be part of it.
This really was an extraordinarily important historical event in world history, the negotiation and signing of the peace treaty between Russia and Japan in 1905, ending what was an incredibly brutal and deadly war, which threatened to drag in other countries. From the perspective of world history, there really is only one thing I can think of that you can point to that happened in New Hampshire that's of greater historical importance, and that was the actual formation of the United States here, when New Hampshire became the ninth and deciding state to ratify the United States Constitution. The negotiation and signing of the Treaty of Portsmouth is above everything else, above any New Hampshire presidential primary, above the Bretton Woods Conference. There's just nothing else of comparable historical importance that's happened in New Hampshire.
My role in the peace treaty planning was to create a curriculum guide for teachers. So I worked with the Portsmouth school system and volunteer teachers and other writers who were willing to participate in our guide, and we created a guide for teachers to teach about the history of the war and the peace. So the guide was given to every school system in the state, complete with a disc of photographs historically gathered from all the different places we could get them to illustrate the story for students. Part of the guide was funded through the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership, so that made it possible for us to create guides for as many people as might want them. They've been sent all over the country, especially to teachers of AP World History who do teach the Russo-Japanese War in their curriculum. So we're very happy to have been part of this celebration and to be involved in this project.
We participated in the Peace Treaty Committee, and the events that we held had to do with our founder, Sarah Farmer, a visionary woman of the time, invited the diplomats to come visit our peace center in 1905. The Russians declined the invitation, but the Japanese accepted, and so on August 31st of 1905, there was a large gathering at the Greenacre Baha'i School where the ambassador, Japanese ambassador, spoke on the theme of peace. Sarah Farmer spoke on peace, and another early Baha'i named Ali Kuli Khan also spoke on peace. There were over 300 people present at that event in 1905. So in 2005, we recreated the event, and we were privileged that the current Japanese ambassador to the United States visited us on that day and gave a speech on the peace platform of Japanese foreign policy.
In 2005, or maybe 2004 actually, I heard of events and plans that were going on for the events that would be held at the Green Acre High School in Elliott, Maine, for the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Peace Treaty. And I, being a songwriter, felt that we needed a song to commemorate the part that Sarah Farmer played in the Portsmouth Peace Treaty signing.
The band is pictured in the 1905 parade as the only band that was there. It was probably one of the biggest events for us and biggest thrills for us in 2005 to come down here with still, well, maybe the band had increased to about 32 members. Rich Spicer did the narration for us, had a lot of the research on the music that was originally played. We played the Russian national anthem, which was difficult to find because it's different now, and the Japanese national anthem, as well as our own United States national anthem, and several of the numbers that were in the original concert and parade in the celebration in 1905.
We tend to focus on political and military events. We tend to learn our history that way. Especially earlier historians have focused almost exclusively on that, but even in our secondary school and even college experiences when we learn history, the framework within which we pigeonhole information tends to be formed by political and military events. And I think sometimes we forget that those events were made by people. And those people were playing their lives out on a complicated stage. And that stage was really formed by the culture in which they were living. And I feel it's very important to bring that cultural background to life. And furthermore, the arts, I think, play a unique role, not just music, but art, theater, dance, because the arts, at the same time that political and military events are playing themselves out, comment upon those events and afterwards reflect upon them in a very unique way. So if you focus exclusively on the political and the military, you end up with a two-dimensional flat surface. But you provide the arts, and it provides that critical third dimension that gives it volume, space, and life. And that's why I became involved.
Portsmouth, known as the City of the Open Door, really hosted an opportunity for citizens of everyday life in New Hampshire to realize that they could impact world history. And indeed, that idea of citizens involved in international government is one that follows through to today, and I believe is among the best traditions of modern democracy.
I've been involved with some of the treaty events since I've been in Portsmouth, which has been over 20 years now. But what impresses me the most about the treaty is, from my understanding, when the two factions were meeting, they were not doing well. They were not coming to terms. They were not coming to an agreement. But because the citizens of Portsmouth organized picnics and dinners and cocktail parties and all kinds of events, the two delegations felt that they owed it to the citizens of Portsmouth to attend these social events, so they stayed in the seacoast. And they were sort of forced to meet day after day after day because they knew that at night they had these different events to go to. So the Portsmouth citizens, and I shouldn't just say Portsmouth, I should say the citizens of the seacoast, all came together to organize these events, which kept the delegations together and kept them here, and that actually is what made them eventually come to an agreement. So we have our citizens to thank for getting involved with such an important part of our history and actually indirectly becoming involved in making it happen, making the treaty happen.
And I want to thank Martha for bringing it forward. Thank you. And here's the majority leader. Our majority leader was also very instrumental. Were you a co-sponsor of that bill?
I was a co-sponsor of the bill.
This lady was a co-sponsor, and not a problem. Everybody agreed. We didn't agree too often last year. There weren't too many 24-0 votes. But on this particular bill, the vote was 24 in the the affirmative and 0 in the negative. Right?
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
I came tonight simply as a community person. As you see, I'm the only one dressed in red, as you're watching this. All of the others are in black because they were in the photo. But I am supportive, as the community was supportive of the historical event back in 1905, and I think this is a grand evening and a grand way to celebrate this wonderful event.
We've, of course, have some documents and some other things that revolve around the peace treaty, so we've been helping out the commission as it goes, and they've got an exhibit that's been up in our new lobby for 3 years, and we support what the commission does.
I was happy and proud to be part of the parade here back a few years ago, that wonderful day that we had the luncheon over at the Navy Yard, and then we had the parade.